not a planned thing. In the sense, I just told Dr. Deepak that we should have some couple of videos that I had difficulty of, getting the nucleus out of the bag, and yesterday suddenly I see my name in the mailer that the presentation is going to be. This is going to be actually a formal presentation by me. So this is something very new for me. In fact, I have never edited a video before. So just yesterday and day before yesterday, I sat and looked at all my old videos and tried to put something together. And this is the very first time I'm actually doing a video editing or even exhibiting any of my surgeries on any public forum. So please bear with me for inconsistency. And I don't have a great video recording equipment either. The quality of the videos will not be as good as what we have seen over the period of last few weeks. So coming to the topic that I wanted a discussion, and ultimately I am starting the discussion, is about techniques of getting a nucleus out of the bag. In fact, getting the nucleus out of the bag and out of the eye is the basic crux of the issue here. I think that for me personally, I think getting the nucleus out of the bag is the
logo on ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಸರಿ ಲೀವ್ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿ.
Hello. We are unable to see any video.
Sorry about that. I'm extremely sorry about that. There's something wrong with my internet. Hello?
Hello, yes. Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. I don't think it will happen again.
So we can't see you.
Can't see me, is it? Just a second. Okay. Okay. Hi. Hello, Dr. Deepak. I see that you're here. So it just I was just explaining to them how this talk came about and how important the nucleus management is, at least for personally for me. I think it's a very important part of the sequence of events that go into a good quality SICS. And I also think that getting the nucleus out of the bag is the most unpredictable part of the whole sequence of SICS. Can I share the screen here?
Yes, sir. You have an option of share screen.
Oh, okay. So before actually going to some of my videos that I could get out of my old collection, actually my present video recording equipment has not been working for the last 10-15 days, but what I have compiled together are some of my old videos. And just before we go into actual videos, let me just brush through a few points that I had made about what are the determinants of a good and atraumatic nucleus delivery. I think the first one is obviously the a proper wound construction. I think a wound which is not good, a wound which is very narrow and shallow, or a wound that is leaky, it can make manipulations difficult in the anterior chamber. And we also need to, check out for deep set ties and make a surgical incision such that the incision is ergonomically placed. Because this is one particular maneuver which requires bimanual. At least for me, it's a bimanual procedure. So I make sure that it's ergonomically placed. Then the other important thing is having a very good visualization of the. My screen is visible there. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. And getting a good visualization is also very important. It's very important. In fact, it's the crux of the issue. And it should be good enough to visualize the entire axis. I think the magnification neither should be too much or it should be too less. The magnification should not be too much so that we lose the depth perception. So because this is one particular step where you require a good 3D perception. You require to see where the other end of the nucleus is dipping in or what exactly is happening when you're manipulating the other end of the nucleus. So it's very important that the depth is not compromised. So it's not, I wouldn't prefer to work in a very high magnification at least during the nucleus manipulation. And when we have certain situations like corneal opacities, prominent arcus, or a very prominent shagreen, or even a poor red reflex, or even when the pupil is not dilated, I feel trypan glue will help us to identify where the rhexis margin is during the delivery of the nucleus. And we should also ensure that you're having a good maneuverability. You need to sit comfortable, take a deep breath, and check the head position of the patient, adjust the speculum that you have placed for bimanual manipulations. So just basically pause at this point of time. I usually do. I take a small pause, take a breath just before I start a nucleus maneuvering procedure. And of course, a good pupillar dilatation is nothing like having a good pupillar dilatation when we're starting to manage the nucleus. It facilitates the easy delivery because it's under direct visualization. You exactly see what you're doing with both your instruments. And in case the pupil has come down, one can actually make a mental diagram of the rhexis with reference to the limbus. And when pupil is really bad, iris hooks are like last time the discussion that we had. Iris hooks are a big boon for an SSCS surgeon. I mean, I use it left, right, and center. And for every small thing, I use iris hook. Sometimes I use 2 hooks. Sometimes I use 4 hooks. I use iris hooks quite a lot. And at various stages of the day, sometimes even for removing cortex, I use an iris hook. I feel it makes life very, very simple. I mean, I'm not as gifted a surgeon as Dr. Ravindra or Dr. Deepak or most of you. For me, visualization is everything. So I always try to use an iris hook quite frequently. And the iris, the rhexis should be adequate. It should be, and also make sure that it is complete, especially in corneas with a bad shagreen or a bad limbus, bad arcus of the limbus. Make sure whatever method is required, you make sure the rhexis is complete, and make sure. I mean, you design the rhexis to the size of the nucleus, And about breaking the rexes, a lot of ego issues. Many times we hesitate to break the rexes. So you have to understand when we have to break the rexes, when we have to control it. I think that's one thing that I will leave it to the panelists to discuss. And of course, the other important thing is doing a good hydro procedure. The hydrodissection, I mean, cleaving the nucleus away from the capsule is very, very important. And and ensure that it is cleaved properly. And in soft cataracts, I further do a delineation also. For one thing, that it gives a better purchase in the nucleus. Otherwise, we'll be just fishing in the cortex, fishing in the epinucleus area. So I always like to do a delineation also in soft cataracts so that it's easy to cartwheel the lens nucleus out. And then, of course, without a viscous substance like HPMC, it's almost impossible to do the techniques that I have developed. I mean, I have, tried to learn and implement. So it's very important not only to maintain the antechamber, but will also give a leverage to the nucleus as it spiralate out to the rexis. And also one small point is also keep a watch on the patient expressing any pain during nucleus manipulations, especially if you have not given an intracameral lignocaine. I usually keep a watch for this. This can be an indicator of any stress on the zonules. I mean, a stress on zonule, a patient winces with pain. So you have to be very careful at that point of time. So there is no doubt that, I mean, Dr. Ravindra may disagree with me, but there is no doubt that there is some stress on the zonules when we try to remove the nucleus out of the in an SSES. So I think these are the few points that I just dotted on into the afternoon. I mean, I'll open this to the discussants if they want to add anything or they don't agree with me on any of these points. These are just what came to my mind today afternoon. I just jotted them down on this. So anybody would like to comment on this? Then I think we'll go over to some of my videos. Would anybody like to comment on this? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, Prashant. You can complete the videos.
Okay.
And then we can, I think there are discussants who will contribute.
Okay. So I will just go through some of a few videos that I could compile from my older techniques that I used to do. I don't do most of these now. I just want to show how exactly we can, I mean, these are the techniques that, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
Okay. So this was a technique I used to use for soft cataracts, like very, very soft cataracts. Just make sure that you have a good hydrodissection, and then you do a hydrodelineation now. That's a hydrodelineation. And then use a broader cannula, like a Simcoe cannula, to just tumble the lens out. This is one thing which I used to do long back. Nowadays, mostly I don't do. Then this is the other visco expression. Again, you can do it in soft nuclei with a good rexis. You can just express it out of the video. And this is what I used to do with grade 2 type of a nucleus. Take out one of the poles and dial the other pole out. And this is the other harder cataracts can also be brought out like this. But nowadays, I don't use these techniques because of various reasons. I think we have gone through this some time ago. Now, most of the times I have switched over to this technique after seeing videos from Dr. Ravindra. So again, after a good rexis and a good hydro, make sure that the nucleus is quite mobile, and hand-on-hand cartwheeling out is what I do. The antechamber should be fully inflated. The visco cannula is going it out, and this works for everything. That was a soft cataract. This was a slightly harder cataract. This works for any type of a cataract. This is my usual technique for. Even it can be done in small pupils, large pupils. I mean, small pupils, hard cataracts, soft cataracts. But the only thing is you need to have a mental idea where exactly is the rexis, and things happen quite smoothly. And this is another case with coloboma with some zonules which are missing in the inferior quadrant, infranasal quadrant, and this is a patient with one eye. So even in such cases, we can easily do a same procedure, and I just injected a lens, and the haptic is supporting the weak zonule. This is a case where I have done it for a case where I have compromised the rexis manual wantonly, because the nucleus is very hard, and this was the only eye of the patient. I didn't want to take any chance. So you can see the nucleus going all around because there is no rexis there, but still it's quite safe. This is the other thing. I mean, you need to be conscious of what you're doing. This I'm not really conscious, and finally I allow it to go all around the place. But still, the buffer of safety is quite high with this technique, so we are through. I think again this one is where I have again compromised the rexis for. I think it's the same video playing again. So I'm not too good at editing. I think the same clip has come twice. I'm sorry. I had not noticed it. And in small pupils, hard cataracts, as long as you're sure where exactly the rexis margin, this technique is quite safe. Yeah, the other advantage of this technique is it's such a controlled procedure. If you can just go back on this. Just keep watching here. This case actually had a blowout, which I had not noticed. After I saw the video later on, I noticed that there was a blowout at the pupil coming down suddenly. I had not noticed during the surgery. And when I started doing the cartwheeling technique, I immediately see the other pole of the, you can stop immediately. At this point, if you can stop, it's quite easy to recover this. It's not a problem. How would anybody of you recover? If I stop here and say how anybody else would recover this, what would be the answer for this? Anybody would like to answer this? There is a nucleus there. There's a huge blowout. You can see the edge of the blowout, and the nucleus is starting to dip back.
Tamper it with viscoelastic first, the area of blowout, and then prolapse the nucleus into the anterior chamber. You cartwheel it so that the vitreous doesn't come out, and then you can.
I think the vitreous is already out here. If I'm not mistaken, vitreous could already be out.
Okay.
Not too sure if the vitreous is out. Not too sure, but anyway. So I saw it dipping backwards. I wanted to support it from the back. So I just made another entry. I think the video is not recorded properly. And the nucleus is almost going down now. It's not very clearly seen because it's out of the frame. So supporting it from one side, I could bring the nucleus out through the vectors. And after this, I think it's just a routine of doing a vitrectomy. And luckily the rexis was intact. The blowout was limited to the hydrophilic lens. I have done a lot of single piece hydrophilic lenses in the sulcus. They're absolutely fine, and it's one of the easiest lenses to implant in the sulcus, and they behave quite well. So this is one of the problems. I'd like to share two more surgeries, which this particular thing I had never understood what exactly went wrong. If somebody could help me, I would be very happy. This is a regular case, but I knew this patient was on tamsulosin, and I knew that he is going to have floppy iris. So it went on well till here. Again, I have a good hydrodissection. I am able to mobilize the nucleus quite well. But somehow it was not getting delivered. I have a good size rexis. I have a good hydrodissection. I'm getting the plane correctly here. Both the planes are correct, but still I'm not able to. This is one problem. It keeps happening once in a way. I still don't have an answer to this. If somebody can help me out what exactly I'm doing wrong, I'll be so happy. This is the video that I actually wanted Dr. Deepak and others to discuss. This is and finally it became a full topic.
So it's a soft cataract.
It is not a very, it must be about grade 2 cataract. This is quite a simple surgery. It should have been over by 5-10 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. But the nucleus was just refusing to come out. I don't know what was the reason. So finally, I prolapsed on the one of the poles, and then I was actually took a sharp needle, ready to do a compromise the rhexis. Then finally, it just cartwheeled out, luckily for me. I still haven't understood why in some cases this happens. This keeps happening even now also, it keeps happening to me. I don't know what exactly is the mistake there or what exactly is not going right there. So ultimately, anyway, takes a little bit more time, but this is one problem I keep facing once in a way. And this is the other problem. And this is also unfortunately, fortunately, a case of IFIS only. So everything goes on well till this point. And this is what happens. So how would one this? I mean, I'm having a good rhexis. I'm taking quite an anterior, this thing. The length of the wound is quite okay for it to prolapse like that. But still, the moment I start a hydro, I see the iris out.
Any other associated problems in the
He's
case?
a tamsulosin. I expected IFIS in this patient. Both the patients, what I showed, were on tamsulosin.
Pressure, intraocular pressure also.
No, normal pressure. It's absolutely normal, except that the patient is on tamsulosin, and I expected him to have a IFIS. So this is situation
The
now.
pre-op steroids could help. Could it help in such patients? Like the other day, I had a patient with PSCG, already with PI patent. One eye operated without pre-operative steroids. His iris started coming out like this.
Okay.
And the other eye, when I operated, I started a week of pre-operative steroids, and that probably helped and didn't have such a problem.
Okay. This was the case of expected IFIS.
I'm not sure, sir. Maybe pre-operative steroids.
Could have helped in IFIS.
I would like others to comment on that.
Okay.
Or at least the pre-operative ketorolac or something like that.
No, ketorolac we start on all my patients.
Okay.
All my patients are on ketorolac.
And you used HPMC, sir, in this case?
HPMC, yes, HPMC only have used.
Okay. Has come down drastically.
Yeah, it's come down drastically, and a lot of iris is outside. The frame is not showing that, but a lot of iris is outside. So how do I go forward from here? So shall I continue the video? How I manage this?
Yes, sir. You please continue. I think you should use iris hooks or something.
Yeah, that's what exactly. Bingo. This is what I did. I used iris hooks and brought this thing out. The small iris prolapse actually used it for at an advantage. I left the iris there, and the nucleus out, and finally that is how it was at the end of the surgery. So these were a few things that I could hunt out, and I think I'll leave everything to discussion now.
Sir, Prashant sir.
Yeah, tell me, sir.
We are anticipating floppy iris in this patient. Correct. How about putting these iris hooks at the start only? And how difficult it is to put it in between?
So many iris floppy iris we manage without using an iris hook. Iris hooks will add another 10 minutes to the 5 to 10 minutes for the surgery. So usually I try to manage without an iris hook in most of the situations. But when something like this happens, I'll be forced to use an iris hook, and I mean, I can use it at any point of time. Like I was explaining to you, I have used iris hooks for every particular situation. I don't have any hesitation using an iris hooks for everything. Always, I have about 7 or 8 sets of iris hooks in my OT, and I feel it is I mean, for an average surgeon like me, it gives a huge advantage. So I use iris hooks quite frequently. I mean, I don't find it any difficulty to using it in any point of time. Sometimes I use only 2 hooks. Sometimes I used hooks only from the main incision. Sometimes for removing the sub-incisional cortex, I put iris hooks from the main incision itself and go from the side port. I mean, iris hooks are really a big boon for an SICS surgeon. I don't see any hesitation using when needed, but start to use it in the beginning, making 4 extra incisions, I wouldn't really, because many times most of the IFS we can manage without, iris hooks. But in situations with demand, I don't have any hesitation of using an iris hook.
I think you can close your sharing screen.
Okay.
Unless you want to show some more videos.
No, nothing. I'm not too sure how I can
comments,
do that.
That observations, I would like to say, excellent videos and excellent analysis of situations, and you caught
I'm
the
sorry,
right.
can somebody tell me how I can stop sharing, because I have never used Zoom. I don't use Zoom that much.
Sir, the same green button is an option.
Pause share. Okay. I get it.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing. Yes. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
In the first case, why the nucleus and doesn't come out of the capsular bag, there are a lot of comments can be given on that. Number one is always do only no. In every other case it's solid, but especially in a soft cataract, it's always best is to avoid doing hydrodelineation. Only do the specific capsular separating hydrodissection. That's the only one thing you should do, so that you don't separate the different layers. You should not even disturb the cortex. Cortex, epinucleus, nucleus has to be kept as one mass, and that will give stability and solidity to the mass. Otherwise, it won't rotate. Even during phacoemulsification, the toughest is not hard cataract. Soft cataracts are the toughest. I mean, you can't hold them. So more the mass, better will be a hold on the mass on that epinucleus. I never separate epinucleus and nucleus in any case for that matter. Keep this one bunch. But as I keep telling, epinucleus is the toughest to remove. The most damaging thing that happens to the endothelium is not while removing the nucleus, but while removing the epinucleus. So I never do hydrodelineation in any of my cases. Number one. Number two, if you keep that, the second thing that you should keep is whenever there is soft nucleus is there, the moment you push fluid into it, especially in a myopic eye, the AC deepens. There, minimize the amount of viscoelastic. Viscoelastic should be enough to coat the endothelium and shallow the chamber, so that when you press it down, you're not distorting the tunnel and you're not elevating the pressure in the anterior chamber, which presses the entire nucleus epinucleus backwards. So keep it elevated so that it's reachable with your instruments coming through the port. Number two, and then you only rotate the nucleus epinucleus bus bimanually. Do not disturb it. Rotate it. I always take the example of a steering wheel fixed to a steering rod. Imagine that's a rod which is fixing onto the steering. Rotate it bimanually all around. You can rotate more than what you normally do for a hard cataract or for a firm cataract. And once you rotate it, push it as much as possible to the left side with the iris hook, with the Sinskey hook, and then go well behind the nucleus and lift it up as one mass. Most of the time, you can't lift it because it's a half-hearted procedure. You think that you can get it. There's no mass there for you to lift. You'll have to have a bulky mass there to lift it out and rotate it bimanually. So soft cataracts are difficult, especially when it breaks down into pieces. Sometimes you have broken one pie of that, then it becomes even more difficult. In those cases, I rotate it 180 degrees, and the intact edge of the nucleus epinucleus is the one which I hold. A broken part of it, you may not get a lift on it. but then rotate it, get an intact portion of the epinucleus nucleus, and then lift it up. I think these are small things that you can try. Shallow the chamber when you're doing it, but once the nucleus, you get a grasp and it's out of the capsular bag, then you can deepen it again to avoid the endothelial damage. So that's about your first case. About the second case, iris prolapse, it's just the balancing of pressure. There are three pressures. One is atmospheric pressure, pressure in the anterior chamber, and pressure behind the lens diaphragm. There are three separate pressures. Any pressure in the vitreous cavity by your speculum starting onwards into the the block that you were given, and anything that presses, or the patient squeezing, there is a positive pressure, and very easily it is transferred to the anterior chamber, and the iris is the first thing that comes out because it lacks tone. And the second is a lot of injection of viscoelastic. More you inject viscoelastic to deepen the chamber, the iris keeps coming down. So one of the trick is you can do, the iris hooks can be put at any time, but what you can do is you can do a small iridectomy right in the beginning. In such case, a very tiny iridectomy, so viscoelastic escapes through the the peripheral iridectomy rather than push the entire iris out. This is, you can make it with a knife, or we can make it with scissors, whatever you want, and that's one thing which can help you. It's just the balance between outside pressure, anterior chamber pressure, and the vitreous pressure, which pushes the uh, iris out. It's a good thing that you did is you let the iris stay outside the eye, one corner, and it's already collapsed and pupil is dilated there. You can go and work at it, but it'll atrophy the iris. So this can be done as a last resort. So using iris hooks is a marvelous thing there. You could have entered the chamber a little more anteriorly. You've gone into the cornea, but little more anteriorly you could have entered if you had anticipated. Maybe when you do the other eye, take the thing a little more anteriorly. This is what a few points I would like to submit.
Thank you. No, actually, for when I suspect an IFS, I always make an incision which is quite well into the cornea. That's the reason I actually showed that video part where I had. But in spite of that, one or two cases do happen like this. In spite of trying to manage everything, moment you start with the hydro, this is what happens. So anyway, thank you so much for all those inputs. Why I do hydrodelineation for soft cataract is to get some purchase on the nucleus. Otherwise, it'll the Sinskey hook, and there is no purchase for the nucleus, no place to keep. So I started doing hydrodelineation for only soft cataracts. Otherwise, usually I don't like to separate the layers because it makes surgical time much more than usual. But soft cataracts I usually used to do. But let me try what you told.
Never disturb. Go ahead, Dr. Deepak.
Sir, actually, what Dr. Prashant sir just demonstrated, there are some cases where when you try to dial the nucleus out, you'll have cheese wiring. The nucleus is so soft. There's no much material there actually. When as soon as you poke your dialer, it just cheese wires and breaks out. And these are situations where it doesn't help you. Even if you have got a perfect cortical cleaving hydrodissection, because the nucleus is so soft, the moment you touch it breaks open. You don't have a mass to catch out and this. And in such situation, we're really caught in a situation, and many situations, especially diabetic cataracts, even you can't do hydrodelineation. The last resort is you try to do hydrodelineation, bring the sign the nucleus, at least you get hold of the nucleus and then remove. In some situations, you can't even have that. Only the outweigh here is you should have a bigger rhexis. If you're not having a bigger rhexis, unfortunately in that case, you will have to just stay there for longer duration of time. But usually what happens, if you just stick around there, usually you'll just manage to get it out. It's not going to be much of an issue, but it is frustrating. And how do you deal with this cheese wiring of the nucleus? Some nucleus you just don't have any substance at all. And if you're stuck with a slightly smaller rhexis, then it becomes very difficult. In those things, I try hydrodelineation then and see if I can get a ring. If we can get that ring, at least that nucleus will come out. So that was one of my concerns in such situations. He was about to do it, sacrifice the rhexis, then somehow he got hold of the endonucleus and he could wheel it out. Dr. Prashant there. I believe that was the edge of the epinucleus which was carrying, and he got hold of it and he could wheel it out.
May I?
Yeah, please, sir.
Prashant, when you are doing this bimanual, your visco, at what stage you inject it into the, when you have lifted the edge, you inject it under the lifted edge, or you keep injecting during the mobilization?
I keep injecting even after when I lift the nucleus on the with the right hand with the 26 gauge cannula. I keep injecting, but not with force, so that I have a purchase with my left hand. So it's a balance between the right and left hand. Very difficult for me to explain. It's almost like right and left hand are speaking to each other, and I keep injecting at a slightly slower pace so that the nucleus is stable there. Then I start cartwheeling it out. So injection never stops actually. I keep injecting, sometimes with more force, sometimes with less force.
When you start injecting, is it before the edge is lifted, or
No. It's after. It's after. It's after. Once I go underneath the nucleus and I'm sure that I'm behind the nucleus, then I start injecting.
Because I was trying to understand why that nucleus was rotating and refusing to come out. Whether there was, this visco pressure over the nucleus, which is
from the front
from getting out of the bag.
No, but I'm already behind the nucleus. I got the correct plane behind the nucleus. In spite of it, many times it just doesn't dial out. This problem I face.
Your cannula is behind the nucleus and still it's not coming out.
Still, yeah, I'm able to. You could see that. I don't know if you saw the. I don't know if you saw my video there. I actually I can show the video once again. I actually go behind the nucleus and I lift it. In spite of it, I'm not able to cartwheel it out. Which is very surprising.
How is it possible? So the edge keeps on staying out, but half is inside the bag.
Yeah, it keeps going back in.
Achha.
There's some mistake I'm doing. I don't know what it is.
Maybe you have to lift it a little more.
Maybe. It's a soft cataract. I can be a little bit more liberal with that, I suppose.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay. See, I would like to tell, which is not visible, and this is something which is very useful to you to understand in both phaco and this thing. And this is a situation which is ideal. Okay. The plane of the zonules, it's never in the same plane, but hypothetically, capsular bag is being stretched there. The nucleus is there, and this is the easiest to remove. Okay. In phacoemulsification, because of the pressure here, the bag is pushed backwards, and there is the anterior capsular flap holds onto this very firmly. Okay. Now, in the shallow chamber, like when you let the visco come outside, it's easier to remove it. This is first. I would like to put this as second. I would like to put the third situation. If this is AC is being shallowed continuously, even then there is this will contract. The forces that close the capsular bag is much higher. So like a clasp, it will hold the nucleus and it will be difficult to come out still. You have a situation, Prashant, like that. You deepen the chamber so well, and the pressure in the anterior chamber is pressing on the capsular flap, and you'll have difficulty in removing it. So even this is the ideal situation when you have a normal kind of status in the anterior chamber. So that is the ideal way to remove, easiest way, whether you do with the soft cataracts or hard cataracts. See that the anterior chamber depth is optimum, so that nucleus rotation occurs without the posterior capsule pressing on it, or the edge of the lens is being clasped by the capsular bag. So this is what mentally you can imagine. My drawings are not very good, but then you can see all these three situations during the surgery. The moment you have difficulty in rotating or lifting it up, find out what exactly is causing that clasping of the edge of the nucleus by the capsular bag.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The nucleus manipulation is actually an open chamber technique. I mean, I don't think we can get a closed chamber when we're doing SSCS. Will it still hold good, this capsule going back and zonules leaning back and leaning forwards? Does it still work? Phaco, I can understand.
But the chamber is maneuverable even in SICS. It's an open chamber technique. it's a combined open chamber and a closed chamber technique. Any moment you can make it as a closed chamber, and any moment you can enjoy the comfort it gives as an open chamber. But then AC depth can be manipulated by continuous injection of either fluid when you're doing Simcoe, or by viscoelastic when you're doing Visco. You can deepen it, and rotation of it also can be done in a deep chamber, normal chamber, or a shallow chamber. It depends upon, like, the visco keeps coming out, and you can keep supplementing it. You can maneuver with that, but at that moment when you're rotating it and taking it out, you can keep it stable without allowing the visco to come out. How does it shallow? Visco comes out. How does it deepen? You inject something inside. Both are under your control, so it can be manipulated in the way you want.
Now, I have a doubt
Can I?
that the visco that you are continuously injecting has something to do with your nucleus not coming out of the bag, because it is definitely viscous. It's not like a BSS or a rinolactate, so it doesn't shallow so easily. Probably if you use cohesive ones, it will be all the more. It will come out still slower. So I think there is an additional pressure on the nucleus by this.
Correct. See, this is the beauty of controlling the pressure in the anterior chamber by visco, and even with Simcoe cannula. Simcoe cannula, no, I always attach Simcoe cannula to the bulb so that I have a control with my fingertips. I don't allow the bottle to flow the way it wants to flow, and behave beyond my control. So that's the beauty of Simcoe bulb, Simcoe cannula. Your feedback is instantaneous. You see it and your fingers act on it. It's reflex action. And then visco injection also is reflex action. I can stop injecting and allow it to shallow. I can deepen it if I want it by injecting more. Everything is under my fingertips. I think that's what you should, especially youngsters, should practice to control. Hydrodynamics in SICs is totally different from phacoemulsification. It's totally different. You can write huge book on hydrodynamics in an SICS. So, but if you keep it under your control, you are the master. That's what I would like to appeal here to everyone.
Two more
Sir,
questions.
one. Can I speak, Dr. Ravi?
Sir.
The one more situation, what happens when you do hydrodissection, it becomes incomplete, which we don't notice it. And next time we try to complete the hydrodissection from other side, sometimes it becomes hydrodelineation. And that is also, sometimes it will be incomplete. So such situations, sometimes I face problem of prolapse leaking out. As Dr. Ravindra sir was saying, hydrodissection should be complete. Something called as corticocleavage hydrodissection.
My video presentation, I'll show you and tell you the tricks of. I think I've told in the earlier one. I'll add on to that. I'll cover that portion when I do that. I have a video to present today. I'll cover it up.
Two more questions asked, or can we use adrenaline in between, like in floppy iris? Does it help?
Not in between. Not in between. See, when you're anticipating it's going to be IFFS.
I don't think it will help.
I not. Why before the surgery, and when you enter into the antechamber, use adrenaline, whether it will help or not. Like I have not used it because I just read in the literature, that's all.
See, to add on, I never use adrenaline either in the bottle or in the antechamber. Never. I never used it for ages. Earlier I used to use, but we did a small study. One of our consultants did that study. We looked at the endothelial counts and different dilutions of adrenaline. And what we found is even 1:10 dilutions of adrenaline, there is a drop in the endothelial count. And endothelium, in spite of protecting the endothelium with viscoelastic, you inject a small amount of adrenaline, and there is a drop on the specular count. So if you really want to save the specular count, it is 1:20 dilution of the commercially available adrenaline. 1:20 is the dilution, but Tropicazole plus put soaked pledget on the limbus, edge of the cornea, will give as much dilatation as adrenaline gives. This also we have calculated in our unpublished data. You just put it and it dilates in 5-6 minutes. Adrenaline I don't use in the anterior chamber at any stage. I mean, people use it, but then there is a compromise on the endothelium. What are the other questions? How do you do peripheral iridectomy?
Iridectomy, yes, I see.
So the iridectomy is not prophylactic in such cases. I've never done prophylactic, but the moment iris comes, you can just, the base of it, you can just take an MVR blade and go through it, and that makes a hole in the peripheral iris, and that should be enough to prevent it from coming back. This is something which you can try if it keeps happening again and again.
So just the stab incision from the MVR blade is good enough to do the iridectomy, or is there some chunk of iris needs to be cut or something?
No. Stab incision is good enough to do iridotomy. I don't call it as an iridectomy. That's good enough to prevent the iris prolapse occurring once more.
Sir, but from the main wound, it is very difficult to do it.
Not only do it, but then also you can widen it with the, once you've gone inside, just widen it, move it laterally like that, and that will widen it.
I think MVR blade is a trick. It's a nice.
But from the main wound, I think it's very difficult to do.
Okay, if you don't go through the wound, perforate, just like I said, tunnel floor entry technique, you go through the tunnel floor, get into the anterior chamber, deepen the chamber there and go through it. But don't go so deep so that you perforate the posterior capsule, which is close by there. Okay. So that can be done. Any other questions?
I think we should know next case. Your presentation.
Yes, sir. Please. Thank you, sir. Prashant, sir. Very nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for.
Can I share my screen?
Please, sir. Please.
Bilateral, typical. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is a case of bilateral coloboma. I operated one after another in 2 days' time. This is a second eye. Let me start. That is how the coloboma is. You can see the coloboma in the periphery. You can see the edge of the lens. There is no coloboma of the edge of the lens. And that's the clinical picture. That's a steep meridian. I'm sitting in the upper temporal quadrant. That's the left eye. Upper temporal quadrant. I calculated the steep axis. I put a toric marker and mark that, and then you go ahead and do this tunnel, the keratome. This is my normal entry. I'll spend a little more time. And I enter at the anteromost sclera through the conjunctiva, travel across the limbus, get into the cornea, and then, as you can see, get into the cornea. Retroreflex, you actually see the folds in Decimet's membrane. I know exactly where I'm entering it. It's the inner edge and outer edge are parallel to each other. The next is injection of viscoelastic into there. I can see the AC deepening. Tunnel floor entry technique, where I perforate the floor of the tunnel there. Tunnel is closed, so visco is trapped inside. AC never deepens. One of the concepts that I discussed is this is the area which is most problematic. So normally I would have started there and gone like that. That's my habit. Always go towards my 3 o'clock and then run around. Here I've gone left side and starting here, so that portion of the zonules is covered at the fag end. So that is the rhexis that you can see comfortably happening. The advantage of this is there are no corneal folds. Imagine I have taken it through the tunnel. The moment I come to this, there is an overlock effect. Then I'll have corneal folds there. Because I've entered the chamber there, visco cannot come outside. Not only that, I can sweep the entire eye, diameter of the eye with this. This discovery has really helped me in very challenging situations. I'm very slow now, and I'm coming a little more centrally, and I do not want to run out there. I've completed got a good one. So I'm enlarging it with my wider blade, and again I ensure that internal and outer are parallel to each other. This will give about 0.75 diopter of SIA for me in my calculations. This is what I was telling Dr. Mallikarjun. I'm taking the cannula there. The tip of the I'll go a little behind. See, this is 2 millimeters from the tip. This is not the regular cannula, which is 10 millimeter. How do I do it? I straighten this 25, this is 27 gauge cannula. It was bent there initially. I've straightened it. Then I have bent it myself 2 millimeters away. This is a beautiful way of doing hydrodissection. Perfect. Few drops are enough to complete the hydrodissection. You carefully follow it. Now I'm going there. I'm already injecting it. This is not perfect hydrodissection. Now I'm insinuating between the capsule and the nucleus. Now this is a soft nucleus. What did I do? I didn't do a hydrodelineation. I'm rotating the nucleus, lifting it up, and it's in the antechamber. 1 clock hour is good enough to rotate it in the antechamber. If you're doing it bimanually, I never do it with single-handed. Single-handed means you're pushing it. When you're pushing it that side, I mean, zonules are there pressed, zonules are here a stretch. So it's bimanually rotating. As you're rotating, lift one edge up, and then you can't compress it. And this is little harder than what I had expected, bisected and visco expressed. Any remaining lenses can be just guided out by injecting viscoelastic there. Bring it to the center. As I'm bringing it to the center, I'm injecting visco in front of it. So chamber is open. I'm injecting it exactly the amount I need to move this. AC is not deepening. AC is not shallowing. This is a reflex you can enjoy by watching it. It's and you maintain the chamber perfectly the way you want, which is a possibility here. Bring it to the center and then keep injecting visco now. As you're injecting visco, you are subconsciously you're watching and allow the chamber to shallow at this point by injecting little less, just enough to coat the endothelium and then aspirate out this amount of cortex which is there. I'm not going to remove it because I've had problems in the earlier cases where I would have pulled some fibers of zonules, fibers of sometimes fibers of vitreous can be lurking into the capsular bag through defects in the capsular bag. So I think that there's a cortical pieces, pull it out, and then I end up in the vitreous, the involvement in the cataract surgery. So because I have no side port, there's only one perfect tunnel there, and I have to use the subincisional cortex removal by J cannulas. And now the fag end, I'm going to remove this very carefully, watching every step what I am pulling it. So you can see the tags there. There are tags in the anterior capsule. Sometimes there are dehiscent there. All this can happen in a coloboma. So now it's a little bit of cortex is hidden there. I'm going to remove it. It's very important to remove every bit of cortex in every cataract case so that you have quiet post-operative cast. All the post-operative STOMI reactions are because of cortical elements left behind, unintentionally inside. Now I was injecting a lens. This is a slit cartridge technique. I've already slit the top of it with the knife, and it beautifully opens up as it's going inside. No, I'm sorry. This is a Hoya lens. I don't have to slit the cartridge. It has got a pre-existing slit at the bottom of the cartridge. So this goes inside. And now this I've done it for the first time. As I'm rotating it, it is not letting the light go inside because it has got a different optics. You can see that. You can see there is light going there. But at the haptic-optic junction, which is a boon actually in this lens, it's quite wide. I thought, why not I keep it in that position so that it remains there and blocks some amount of light. So this light which hits there is going elsewhere. It's not going to the macula area. So the contrast for the patient is better. Then I saw that for the first time. I thought, why not I use that opportunity, and I've kept that wider portion of the haptic in that area, rotated it, and removed every bit of visco from the capsular bag so that it doesn't rotate postoperatively. It did not rotate in either of the eyes. And that's the end of surgery. This is what I had done 2 days ago, the other eye. I recorded the other eye at the end of surgery. So now I would have, many times I make a small slit here so that people dilates on that area. I would have taken a photograph of this preoperatively and see where is the reflex, Purkinje reflex. Here the Purkinje reflex, this other eye. This is the left eye, that's the other eye. Hope we can see the eye looking straight. Now this is, you can see here, that's blocking that. And patient is extremely happy with this scenario. She has a pinhole sort of an effect, and she is seeing through the visual axis. The pupil for that bright light is not covering the visual axis. So this is what I just wanted to see. This is a second day post-op after a very similar surgery done on the other eye. Here also I've done in the upper temporal quadrant. That's a steep meridian, and the patient has very good control. This is the first eye, which I have not edited. There's a very similar reflex. I have not edited, it's run through. Again, I've started beyond that, and this is a longer video. I always hold it at the limbus, tunnel floor entry. I've started from that point. Normally I would have started there and gone like that. So with the past experience that I come at the fag end, enlarging with this. Rotation, bimanually, lift. As I said, this is a soft nucleus, but still we can keep it in one go. 1 clock hour is enough to rotate to bring it to the anterior chamber. Visco injection. Let us see how did I do hydrodissection in this patient. That's what Dr. Mallikarjun asked. Yeah, that's a special cannula. See now, two drops. That's enough to complete. I'm doing it from the other side. Second one, I don't do it all the time. The fluid goes, travels, and comes back. Bisection, and then removal of the cortex at that portion at the fag end. And that remains there, blocking the. That's another patient. So let us see hydrodissection there. See there. This is a capsular separating hydrodissection. Already it has come out. It's soft nucleus. It's very easy to remove. This is a different case. It happened to be in the same video. Yeah. So the points that I would like to put across is the zonular area, the colobomatous area is a weak area. There are certain defects which are more than what you can see. The zonules are weak. Zonules you may be able to tear away the zonules. And this technique, the entire nuclear management is done in the anterior chamber. So there is no zonular involvement, stretch or push or pull in this technique. I think anywhere, any condition where the zonules are dehiscent, I would request you to go back to this particular technique of removing the nucleus in toto from the capsule back to the anterior chamber. Manage it separately so that you're not involving the zonules at any cost. Even I've operated 1/3, 1/4 of capsular bag has the pre-existing zonular defect. You can comfortably manage this with SICS, with this particular technique of bimanual management of the nuclear removal from the capsular bag anteriorly. And wherever you suspect there is weakness, keep it at the fag end. Everything is done at that area fag end. Be very watchful when you're doing that. So these are the 2-3 points I would like to tell about it. Preoperative photograph is very important when the eye is myosed. Sometimes the iris comes out so low that it is blocking your visual axis. Patient is having sort of eccentric viewing in this patient, though the macula is very good. In such patients, you mark it out and make a slit of it. Just make a small slit and it opens up on the superior side. This is only possible when you have a preoperative photograph to analyze when you're doing the surgery. So these are my 2-3 points that I would like to say how we can improve the standard of your surgery in a colobomatous eye.
Can I share my screen for a short?
Well done.
Sorry, sir. Carry on, sir.
No, please go ahead.
Now, can I share my screen for a second? if you don't mind.
Please.
How do I do that? Okay. So this is the case that I showed you, the same coloboma. And I mean, after your video, I was just noticing the video. I mean, when I was compiling the video, I just noticed that even in my case, I mean, this is a one-eyed patient. The other eye was having a total coloboma. This is the only seeing eye. And this area, this was the haziness that I was seeing. I always thought there is a cortex, and I tried my best to remove this. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. I was not too sure what it was. I thought it was cortex, tried my best to remove it. Then finally I got a little bit scared and didn't want to compromise the situation there. Being a one-eyed person, I just left that there. And I thought there is I didn't see the zonules here. So I supported the area with the haptic. I mean, what exactly is this part? Is it cortex or which I have left back, or is it folds in the?
See, I've tried to remove them earlier. They are sometimes the vitreous fibrils. Nobody knows what they are. So, but when I started pulling them, they kept on coming out like threads. So later I realized they're part of either zonules or they are vitreous filaments also. They are there are a lot of defects that we really do not know what is the anatomy of the capsular bag in that zone. Best is to remove as much as it's possible. Then don't try to explore it too much, but don't leave cortical fibers. Cortical fibers are amorphous. It's easy to grasp them and pull it out, but if it's anything beyond that, I think it's better to avoid them.
Okay. Is it the different reflex because of the choroidal coloboma associated with this in that area? Is that reflex we are seeing, sir?
Yeah,
Whitish?
you do see the reflex. You do see the reflex, but then that will have a different consistency in the plane. What I'm telling about is you can't see my pointer, but there are whitish lines there. Sometimes these filaments are a little longer. They come into the beyond the the CCC. Then I'll have to be very careful. Sometimes I've gone and cut them out with Vanna scissors so that they don't stay behind the lens. So, but in a couple of cases, they are vitreous fibrils. They keep coming down. Then I presume that there are dehiscences there through which vitreous fibrils can come into the capsular bag. So you see one striae there, one fibril there, that one. So that can be a zonule or a vitreous fibril. If you keep pulling it out, it will keep coming out like a thread.
Mm-hmm.
I've had this before.
This surgery I have done many years ago, maybe in 2017 or 16. I don't know when.
The other option you have is
you can remember at all about this patient.
You can make two tiny cuts at the junction of pupil and the colobomatous area, small cuts, and it's very easy to do it. And you can put a Prolene suture to give a very round shape. I've done it before, very like this one. You can stitch one end to one end, but you have to give a small cut there with Vannas on both the sides and join those, and you'll have a wonderful round pupil. That's something which you can really try next time.
But I thought this anyway is going to be in a translucent area, which it will not participate in any visually significant light transmission. I mean, that's what I could have.
So, anticapsular ring.
In your case, did you consider doing pupilloplasty? Ravindra?
No, my case. No, I didn't consider for this patient doing a pupilloplasty. It all depends upon this. As you can see, the postoperative photograph is a very narrow slit, and patient was not having huge problems with vision, and I didn't consider a pupilloplasty in that patient. Okay. But if I slit on the top side, where the pupil opens up and it becomes larger, here the pupil was very small, even at the end of post-operative second day. But then if I enlarge it superiorly, then I'll consider putting one stitch in the lower area. There is a way to do it. You'll have to do two MBR ports at the limbus in the inferior on either side. Pass a long needle pass a long needle with a curved needle or a straight needle. The ROLab also has got a needle through that, and then bring the two threads into the main tunnel. And I've got a video on that, and then slip the knot from top to bottom.
Another interesting observation Prashant Islur made was this anterior capsule after some time opacifies. By that way, that iris coloboma area is blocked.
Covered. Correct.
So
You're right.
the disturbance.
So yes, sir. Exactly. That's what I wanted to. I have seen a good number of cases. If you leave behind the big.
The loop or this thing there to prevent the light from passing through, etc.
The quality of vision that comes out through a round pupil is totally different from quality of vision that comes out with opalescent, iris. Like it's never totally blocking. It's whitish there. Some amount of white light, some light goes through it and hits somewhere in the retina. Like exactly this happens when I put the lens also. Light is going inside, but it is not hitting the macula. But light itself can create problem for the overall visual comfort of the patient. The ideal thing is to make a round pupil for any person for that matter. But the next option is the having an opaque capsule there or an IOL haptic. I don't know. This was done just about 15-20 days ago. I have not really talked to the patient how the patient is feeling vis-a-vis when the cataracts were not there as far as the visual comfort is concerned. I'll have to talk to her and come back.
Sometimes the area where there is coloboma, there is a lot absence of zonules also. At that time, the capsule there is thicker than the rest of the the capsular area. So then when you put the IOL, it doesn't seem to stay in the center. Have you had any experience of that, and how did you manage if there was?
See, the best scenario is probably putting a CTR there and give rigidity to the rhexis. The next best is putting a rigid PMMA IOL in such a way that the long axis, that's the haptics are stretching. It stretches very well. It's as good as putting an capsular tension ring. Put in such a way that the long axis of the lens is, abutting the colobomatous lens. The next option is even these lenses are quite rigid. They're not very flexible. Ensure that the lens remains there in the colobomatous area.
So these patients sometimes they are associated with microcornea and microphthalmos. And the lens size would be not micro. I mean, it would be a little bit bigger also. So how to manage? How to manage, sir?
See, a small eye or a microphthalmos, there are so many classifications. There are anterior microphthalmos, posterior microphthalmos, total microphthalmos, which is called nanophthalmos. The huge classification is there. In the way you say, there are huge lenses and very small cornea. You can comfortably do a surgery, and if you know the anatomy of the lens, big, small, you can just go ahead and do a standard surgery. But the thing is, 6 millimeter on that cornea will be too long. It looks big, so you can take little posterior incision. Follow the same philosophies as I've done. A lot of them microcornea associated with mature cataracts are very hard. They seem to have very hard nuclei. I don't know why. They all have very hard nuclei. I think it's the same thing, but endothelium gets compromised if you're careless, because it's a very small built anterior chamber in these patients.
So, but the IOL size, you prefer a customized IOL size or regular?
I've customized IOL for any number of cases. But when the lens size is large, you can put a standard IOL. Otherwise, you can have a smaller IOLs. You can ask any of the companies. They'll be very happy to provide them. And I've put as much as 10, 10.5, 11, 14 diopter lenses, long axis. All lenses are possible. So you will have to calculate and get sometimes you can have 2-3 lenses depending upon the size of the capsular bag. I mean, they are not expensive. So 2-3 lenses you can keep it depending upon.
For the benefit of others, I mean, what parameters you take and which company you are, I mean, which are the companies that are making the smaller lenses and what parameters you give to them to get the customized lens. That's because it will be helpful for others.
Yeah. See, the axial length of the eye, if the axial length of the eye is normal, it's only the microcornea is there. You can presume that the size of the lens is probably near normal. You can do a B scan and actually measure the diameter of the lens. Thickness of the lens can be measured by A scan, and that will give clear instruction. Normal lens is about 10.5 millimeter in the diameter. Thickness is about 3 to 5 millimeter in thickness. And if you have found that this, imagine you don't have a B scan, you can do a diagnostic A scan mode and find out how far the lens is covering the sclera, how far behind it is going there. So you can get a rough estimate of the lens diameter by either a scan or a B scan or UBM if you have, all the three are possibility. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to have hi-fi machines to diagnose the width of it. How do you do diagnostic A scan? I think it's we can talk about it sometime later. It's basically taking the probe, make a drawing of the cornea on a paper and keep it at different levels and find out how far the lens is tracked by the probe. So that one. And what was the other question? The lens, who makes? So all the
Yes,
companies, Care company makes it, and Apaswamy we not tried. Aro Lab makes it, and near Bangalore we have Freedom. I've gone to the lab, and they have very good facilities, and they can make anything that you want. I have done a 60 diopter lens, done a lot of work on it. It's a beautiful lens, and single lens. I put it in Nana ophthalmic eye. She's really enjoying the vision. The calculation of the IOL power, whatever I wanted at 60 diopters, very difficult to get, then I've achieved. She is having minus 1.25 spherical with 0.5 cylindrical power. She's a computer worker and she's enjoying her vision now without glasses. Corneal diameter is 10 millimeter. We had a special lens created for her. It's a PMMA lens, and that's the best we can do for her.
Sir, white to white diameter, corneal diameter would help, no, for deciding customizing the lens.
White to white corneal diameter in these cases may not match the equatorial diameter of the lens. Maybe it's bigger, maybe it's same. Many often it's bigger than white to white diameters. It's much bigger. Most of the cases I've got a couple of videos on that microcornea. One of the cornea was 6 millimeter. 6 millimeter was the diameter of the cornea. He had intense nystagmus and he was blind. Pressures was 40s and 50s. Microphthalmus, small eye. And his cataract was huge, occupying half of the eye. And he has vision today. So these are the possibilities that you can really look at. I mean, everything in India, we are blessed in that way. We don't have to take any, like you can really work on and give the best to them.
So sometimes these patients, after long term, they come with this capsular fibrosis, decentered IOL, and do you have any experience at managing them? And
I didn't get the question. Can you repeat? Decentered IOL, I got it. Then can you repeat the question? Hello.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Now I can hear. Yeah.
Sometimes what happens, we put the IOL, it will mismatch of the back size and the IOL, and then committed IOL and fibrosis. And do you have faced that problem and how to deal?
What was the initial condition? Mismatching the size?
Coloboma, sir. Coloboma.
Coloboma. Yeah. See, if you have placed the lens inside the capsular bag, it should behave just like any other lens. If the pupil if the rhexis is too small, imagine you made a 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter rhexis and then put it inside, then there is a capsular contraction and the rhexis can contract, and then whole lens back can get decentered because one side zonules are weak, the rest of the zonules are normal. See, they're zonal, very small segment of the zonules are weaker. Rest of the zonules are probably healthy and normal. They can hold on. And your IOL itself will stretch the weaker portion of the zonules and prevent it from contracting. Why does it contract? Just because zonules are weak, the capsular bag will not contract. It's a shrinking of the capsular bag because of the rexes that you've done. I've never tried to make 3-4 cuts on the. That's one of the thing I thought when I ended up in such weak zonular area. Should I, at the end of the surgery, compromise rexes by giving 2-3? I think Deepak, give me your feedback on this. It's in back of the mind. Why not I try it in some patients? But I never really had a capsular contraction decentering the lens. I've never seen it actually in my surgeries. I don't know why. Even in I tend to do 4 mm X's, 5 mm X's, 6 mm, all kinds of X's we do it. And I'm not ended up in this thing. I think one of the prime cause for the constriction of the Rexes is you have left some amount of the cortical fibers inside. If you're thorough in washing the cortical fibers, I'm not talking about LECs, I'm talking about if you're thorough in cleaning, which is a possible in SICs. Sometimes in phaco, you may leave some cortical fibers there, but in ICS, you can really take care that you remove cortical fibers. The moment you remove cortical fibers, the fibrosis that happens to the back, probably, that's my thought, is lesser. And even in small rexes, I don't have the severe capsular contraction, which I've seen some of the cases, which coming like very tight backs, squeezing the lens out, and then you cannot penetrate with the ag laser. All those things are seen. But decentration occurring, see, much of the zonular weakness are created by us while doing the surgery. You just see any surgery for that matter and see how much of manipulation we are doing to the nucleus and epinucleus. We are just doing it all that. Zonules are not visible. Okay, then we take it for granted that everything is fine. So, but then if you're moving the entire thing there, you're tearing the zonules, you're stretching the zonules, you're pushing the zonules. I think zonular protection is probably one of the things that we'll have to look forward in our surgeries.
And one more thing, sir. Some of the cases will come with very hard cataracts, very brown, hard cataracts. Sometimes I'll end up with even trying all the sorts of things. It will end up with the ICC, and I have put iris claw lens in that. So, what is your comment, sir?
Ask me, iris claw are the best lenses. They are the best. That's my personal opinion. A lot of people say I'm not right, but then they are the most least traumatic, and they are the best. See, one thing that I had in my mind was, are these because I'm removing the capsular bag? Sometimes hyaloidal phase is intact, sometimes hyaloidal phase is broken. I have to go and do a vitrectomy, and then none
in coloboma case only, sir. In coloboma.
Fine. It's same. There's nothing special about it. In none of the cases, we have had cystoid macular edema. So that's something which they say the tumulousness of the lens causes cystoid macular edema. I've never seen CME in these patients clinically. We're not an OCT in all these patients. I would like to do in some point of time, compare these patients' iris claw lenses versus the standard PCI OLs. But clinically, we have never seen any impressions. So these cases also behave something like that. What's most important in these cases, because of abnormal development, the embryonic cleft is abnormal. They could be associated retinal holes. You'll always have to examine the retina before surgery and a month later. Dilated examination by a vitreoretinal consultant is a must in these patients, because these are known to have giant retinal tears, huge tears along the colobomatous edge, and retina has to be looked at in these patients.
I think Dr. Mallikarjun sir wanted to ask that these are associated with some zonular weakness with a bulky nucleus, and to prevent inadvertent ICC, what would you recommend? That was his question, I think.
Fine. Preventive, make rexes as large as possible. The second is ensure that you can stay in the capsular bag, as Prashant did mention that he would like to stay in the capsular bag so that he can see the capsular bag very, or inadvertently don't pull the capsular bag out. And if it's a very hard nucleus, always have a large capsule CCC. The one thing that is sure to prevent the entire capsular bag coming out is avoiding restricting the size of rexes. Make the rexes really larger, and this possibility will not occur.
Yes.
Did I answer, or you have any other additional?
No, sir. Perfectly fine. Maybe I would like to add one more point. I would insert a CTR after doing a bigger rexes before mobilizing the nucleus out. Okay. I think that would be my strategy here to prevent this from becoming an intracapsular. And second, regarding the point of capsular phimosis, as you said very rightly, reaving cortex is the most common risk factor. But there are certain diseases which are predisposed, like retinitis pigmentosa, and these cases you always have. You put a ring, you put a PMMA lens also, still the capsule just folds up. In a matter of just 6 months, you can see the capsule folding up and causing meiosis. So these are pathological eyes, they are weak eyes, they behave like that, and you can't really prevent, you don't know how to prevent it. But I think the best way would be during the time of surgery, making about 5 to 6 radial cuts at the rexus margin. After putting everything, lens, ring, everything, that would probably decrease the incidence of capsular phimosis in these compromised eyes, not in regular eyes. Regular eyes you don't have. Even if you make a 4 millimeter rexus, you don't get capsular phimosis. You will not get it all if your cortical cleanup is very good. Only these sick eyes, like especially retinitis pigmentosa and few pathological myopic eyes, these can be a problem. This can be a problem. And in those special situations, maybe you can just consider this. See, we could talk about foldable lenses. Even I have PMM lenses where the capsule is totally shrunk down. If a rigid lens, I put in a ring, but still the capsule shrinks down in these retinitis pigmentosa eyes. So that is something we can just plan it out. And second point, I had a question for you, sir, regarding this coloboma iris. Your mastery over controlling the fluidics is exemplary. I don't think anybody of us have that much of a skill here. But one of the most common issues is fluid traversing across the weak area and causing fluid misdirection. So your answer would be always control with the Simcoe bulb. But I'm sorry to say that most of us are not comfortable or not use the Simcoe bulb now, or not forgot to use the Simcoe bulb. What would be your strategy to minimize this aspect? Because I have had this issue where when you're trying to do irrigation aspiration or when the fluid gets in, it passes out invariably. And what were your strategies to deal with this?
Yeah, I think the identification that it's a possibility itself will cure many of them. It's a possibility that the fluid we inject into the anterior chamber can go and find out through normal zonules. It can go and percolate and get into the vitreous cavity. Most of the time we don't notice it. We just keep pushing the fluid inside. We hope that the entire lens goes backwards, and we are very comfortable with that. So in addition to going backwards, fluid goes out to the periphery and through the zonules gets into the vitreous cavity and it lifts it up. So this happens so many times. I see videos and suddenly the pressure goes up. That's because of this thing. In this case, there is a right royal pathway, as Dr. Deepak mentioned, and avoid taking the cannula in that direction of this. And your injection of fluid should always be either under the capsular bag or in any other quadrant except for this quadrant. So if you take that much care, probably the fluid will not go inside. It is a force through which you're pushing it in that direction is the one which takes out. Generalized increase in the pressure, the AC deepens, and that case also the fluid can go out, but the quantity of fluid going out into the posterior segment is more as you're directing it towards that area. Apart from that, I don't think...
You can consider dry aspiration if you are so much worried.
When you're aspirating the cortex?
Yes.
Dry aspiration is a very relative terminology, and it's almost impossible. Imagine, you're aspirating with a single cannula. It's very difficult. You'll have to balance the chamber with something inflow and outflow.
No, I mean dry manning under visco.
Under visco. That's a very good idea.
Yeah.
But the visco, that's a very excellent idea. But we don't push visco too much into the arterial chamber. Just keep it enough so that AC deepens little more than the normal AC depth, not beyond that. And then you'll have to keep on replenishing and dry aspirate. That's a good idea. Very good idea. But it takes a little longer time, but that I've never tried. But I always would like to go with visco, my Simcoe cannula, and balance the AC depth and do it. But see, as I said, in both the eyes, I manage the cortex removal also, the phagan, so that there is no fluid gush going into the colobomatous area. That's a very good possibility because zonules are deficient. You will have fluid going inside. As I said last time, one drop of fluid going into the vitreous cavity is enough to devastate the entire surgery. So that you'll have to be literally careful.
I think the message here is
regarding this cornea looking small and we suspect to have a normal sized lens, the angle will be more on the scleral side, more peripheral.
Correct.
You can throw a light tangentially and identify the angle, and then you can plan exactly from where we start the tunnel. It could be more, that you have to go more scleral. Before that, we can identify the angle by just throwing light from an angle, and it will glow where the angle ends. Or
you will actually see the ciliary body zone. You don't see the angle through sclera, but ciliary body band can be easily seen. And then you can presume where the angle is, and then you can work actually scleral incision, mostly scleral incision, and get it to the eye. So there are a lot of different varieties of the microcornea and microophthalmos.
I think the message you're trying to give is low pressure surgery is the key here. If you're using a bottle light, ensure that the bottle light is reduced when you're trying to do it. And again, I would like to prevent the support that area. I would use again a CTR so that it restricts the fluid again going across that area, and maybe block that area with dispersive OD. If you think that already it's going inside, block that area and then do a controlled cortical aspiration using very low bottle height and aspiration parameters with your syringe or whatever you do. That should
many a times, because if there are no zonules, none of this works, because it is as if there is a column of the lens. So the lens is not, circular. So that thickened capsule will refuse to, go to the periphery. So either you put a ring or an IOL haptic there and all that, nothing will work, and it will slightly remain eccentric. So whether we like it or not.
It will be eccentric, sir, but what happens is the rest of the zonules are very healthy. So usually you don't find the lens decentering in the post-op period. The defect will remain.
Not in that sense. Zonules are totally healthy, but overall there is overall shape of this bag itself is different, and the thickening, resists any stretching or trying to push it to the periphery. It won't go.
In such cases, you can keep the IOL perpendicular to the zone of coloboma. You don't have to push it there. If it is perpendicular, then it's never get pushed to the other side.
Yeah.
I usually put a smaller size of a CTR, whichever smaller size of CTR available in these particular cases. What is the comment about it? Because I feel everything is smaller there. If you try to put a bigger CTR, we might stretch it more. We might stretch the bag more, and sometimes it might rip open. It might rip open some journals. That's what my concept, and I try to put whichever smaller size CTR is available.
Usually,
Deepak, corollary to that, where do you want to start putting the CTR? You don't mind going through the colobomatous area right in the beginning, or you would like to reach there at the fag end?
No, I'd like to start from the other end, sir. And then go towards it the later part, because the rest of the zonules are quite healthy. Now, regarding the point of sizing of the CTR, Mallikarjun, there are only two sizes available commonly, the 10 to 12 and 11 to 13. And most of the times we are always using 10 to 12 size. That is 10, it's enclosed, and when it stretches, it becomes 12. And in myopes, we use the 11 to 13. So I think 10 to 12 is the one which is most commonly used. And I don't think we have a smaller than that size. So we are invariably forced to use this 10 to 12 combination. Is it okay, Mallikarjun?
Yes, that's available, but I don't know whether these pediatric surgeons or pediatric ophthalmologists they have any. I need to.
No, Mallikarjun, see, we are in India. You ask them, they'll make and give you. It's all CAD-CAM controlled. So they'll be very happy to supply one. And they'll call it as Mallikarjun rings, Anything is possible. Your imagination is a limit. That's a beauty of we practicing in India.
I think, sir, time to wind up.
Time to wind up.
There are no many questions. Dr. Pradeep, will you please give the closing remarks?
Yes, sir. It was a wonderful session for the beginning of a new year with the two great surgeons. Dr. M.S. Prashant, his surgeries, the main take-home messages which we can say to the PGs is difficulties in difficulty during nucleus mobilization. The first criteria is to have a bigger axis and proper hydro, and then whichever you are comfortable, either bimanual or hydropolyps you can do. And the second topic was by Dr. M.S. Ravindra, and his take-home messages will be first have a pre-operative slit lamp photograph so that we should know the at least corneal reflex where it is, whether the collibometer, the pupil reflex is whether it's covered by pupil or not. And the second thing is which I felt very good was the optic haptic capture should be in the area of coloboma so that it acts as a it acts like a translucent area and the light won't disturb. And there were so many other take-home messages. Just I like to conclude this. Thank you.
Can I add one thing here? I mean, through the formative years, I have seen so many surgeons operate, so many good surgeons operate. What I have noticed, the difference with the good surgeons is they'd have one particular technique and they try to, control the whole situation to bring their technique across. So I feel this nucleus management also, I think we should follow one particular technique. Previously I used to, sit down at the table and then decide what I have to do. But once I saw this Dr. Ravindra's cartwheel technique, now I try to fit the situation such that every case will fall into that particular situation. So, that's what I feel the difference between, so you have a particular game plan in hand already. So rather than sitting in, what I used to do before, and I still do that many times, but I think having one game plan and stick to one thing and control the whole surgical situation to suit your technique is what I have seen the good surgeons who get consistent results always. That's one thing that I wanted to stress, but somehow I couldn't bring it out in the talk. But when he was trying to sum it up, I thought this is one point I actually missed. So nowadays I try to follow one particular technique for every case. Though I'm tempted to do something else, but I always try to bring it to this technique. I don't know if I'm doing right or wrong, but I think that's one small point I wanted to bring across.
I think I'll just add on here. If by section I control it, sometimes do it. There are same steps. 100 surgeries, they're similar, whatever may be. And then sometimes I have to do it from right to left. The nucleus comes out, like inadvertently. Then I push the nucleus back. Then I go back to my standard technique and lift it up from the right side. So that should be the convictions.
That is, if supposing the nucleus comes out of the eye and it doesn't come according to your liking, you will put it back, is it?
That's because I'm used to rotating in the direction to minimize the damage to endothelium.
That's how you are still using the Simcoe bulb. So we can understand your mindset out of that.
The control you get in Simcoe bulb, I don't think anything will control. Anything will be as much beautiful. It's micro control you can do it with Simcoe bulb.
Yes, was going through the PC rent.
Yeah.
You can use a 20 gauge needle, sharp needle, and just lollipop the nucleus and hold it. And you buy time, so it doesn't nicely. The needle goes into the the substance of the nucleus, and you can hold it and you maybe use a Vectis or whatever and take support from behind, and then if you all the more good.
No,
because
you don't have a side put from the left side, no?
No, it can be from the other as well, whichever side. Just pierce and just hold it, and then you organize yourself, and then whatever, use another instrument and bring the prolapsing part up, or you pass the vectis according to the situation.
See, I have a few points to add there. Number one is when did the tear occur? When did the PC rent occurred when you probably did a hydrodissection?
Yeah,
You might have noted
noted
it later, but that's probably has happened at that point. And if I see a rent there, and if there, I'll never inject anything into the eye. I think you made a new port and injected some more viscoelastic. So now you're actually increasing the pressure in the front of the nucleus and promoting it to go back. So I would do nothing. I would stop, think on for some time, and then go through the main tunnel, try to lift the nucleus up. If the nucleus is not coming out, bring it out, then I will not be putting any pressure, additional pressure in the antechamber. And if the nucleus has gone a little more behind, I have no hesitation. I've done it in my career about 3-4 times in the past. 3 millimeter behind, then patterns for a couple of. So through the pars plana, through the, I don't have to make any decision, just pass it and lift it up. If it's really sinking, otherwise most of these nuclei can be lifted up easily and comfortably by just 2 instruments without injecting anything into the antechamber.
No, they're standing perpendicular to the line of incision. So there's no way I could have put the vectis.
No, don't
there
put vectis.
inside.
2 instruments.
I had to come from the left hand. I mean, the 20 gauge needle was okay. It was a good idea. But
Cannula and Sinskey are my best. Cannula in the right hand, Sinskey in the left hand. You can manipulate anything in the antechamber.
But I didn't have a port on the left.
Approach in a different this one and lift with the other one. Support one nucleus, one end of the nucleus.
Like
with
chopstick, you can.
Like a chopstick, exactly like a chopstick.
Anyway, I think when you start seeing a nucleus sinking, your mind stops. For a moment, it stops working.
Not your mind.
No, a sharp needle will do the trick. Like as Ravindra said, go from pars plana and just lollipop it. You just lift it up, and you can aram se put the vectis, and then.
My idea was to just lift that dipping edge up so that I can put the vectis and extract it out from the main.
This is not the best instrument.
This is it keeps pushing. There is a vitreous or something, then all the more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Namaskar.